If government officials funneled $400 million of your tax money into their own pockets, you would have heard about it by now, right?
He has $1 billion fund whose own bureaucrats say reminds them of the sponsorship scandal, whose executives give money to their own companies.
But you probably haven't, because when Liberals are in power, the parliamentary press gallery doesn't like to highlight Liberal corruption.
There's been explosive testimony by a whistleblower on this Prime Minister's $1 billion green slush fund that's seen $150 million misappropriated and gone to Liberal insiders.
Liberal appointees to a board that got to make decisions as to which companies got grants worth millions of dollars of taxpayers' money gave those grants to their own companies.
We have breaking news, and it comes from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. And this is, of course, dealing with this matter, this latest $400 million scandal facing this Liberal government. And the RCMP confirms that they are investigating this $400 million scandal of this Liberal Prime Minister that has paralyzed Parliament. But they also confirm that they have and are using the documents that have so far been turned over by the parliamentary law clerk. So this, of course, raises questions about, well, why was the government willing to turn over some of the documents, yet some departments refused outright? Some departments have said they're not even a part of the government, which is, of course, an absolutely incredible statement to hear from them. Now, I want to reference another bit of information about redacted records, or the absence of them. Now, the list of departments that didn't comply are typed in a very small typeface on this 11 by 17 sheet of paper, but one in particular stands out. It's the Department of Justice. More than 10,000 pages that they are not turning over. Why won't this Prime Minister's DOJ turn over these documents to the cops? What is so damning inside them that while the RCMP confirms they have some of the documents, these Liberals and their co-conspirators aren't prepared to turn over the rest? What's in these documents? Canadians have a right to know. And as a matter of fact, that Liberal government has a legal obligation to turn them over. Now, it's not because I said so. It's because in Canada, we have a democracy, and a majority of democratically elected MPs used the powers that have been bestowed on this House of Commons to ensure that when a matter is of public interest, that the production of papers is absolute and it is unrestricted. Now, what could be more important to the institution of Parliament, to the protection of our democracy, than to make sure that when there's a matter involving more than 180 conflicts of interest, $400 million in this corruption scandal overseen by that Liberal Prime Minister and all of the Liberals who have stood up today, especially the parliamentary secretary who's clocked over 100 minutes in this saga that has paralyzed Parliament. Why won't they turn over those documents that are so important so that Canadians can get answers? Now, are we looking to be the judge, jury, and executioner in this place? No, we want to turn it over to the RCMP. And are the RCMP going to investigate because we told them to? No, the RCMP is investigating because they have reasonable grounds to believe that an offense under the criminal code has been committed, that it's in the public interest for them to investigate it, and they'll lay a charge if they believe that there's a reasonable prospect of conviction. Is that why? Is that why these Liberals are withholding all of these documents from all of these many departments? From the Atlantic Canadian Opportunity Agency, they're too afraid to turn over documents. Canada Revenue Agency, the Canada Northern Economic Development Agency, Foreign Affairs, Department of Housing, National Defence, National Resources, and on And on it goes. 10,000 pages alone from the Department of Justice. Now, we've seen before from these Liberals what happens when the RCMP, they've said, well, what, normally, we've heard the Justice Minister stand up and say, well, they'll get a production order, just knock on the door and say, turn over the documents. But the thing is about this Liberal government and that Liberal Prime Minister, the one who's been found guilty of breaking the law twice himself, along with his Public Safety Minister, found to have broken the law. The Small Business Minister broke the law. So with that as the context, when the RCMP came in and knocked on his door, that Prime Minister's door in a case of a criminal matter, they said they couldn't turn over the documents because of cabinet confidence. So this is what's going to happen. This is the game that they want to play. They want this to go to committee, they say. But why? Is that because the documents will be tabled with the committee? No, it's to study the question of if the documents should be tabled. The House already ordered the production of the documents. So that's done. That's done. A majority of democratically elected members. Not one party with a minority of seats in this House and shrinking returns in every election and evaporating public support. That's not who gets to decide. The majority of democratically elected members, that's who. And that decision's been made. They must turn over the documents because it's the law. But that doesn't concern these Liberals or that Attorney General. Because what they want this to go to committee. And they want the police to come and say, hey, can you turn over those documents? You said if we brought a search warrant that you'd provide them. Sorry, we're afraid it's cabinet confidence. Here's those 10,000 pages heavily redacted. That's the game that they're playing with our democracy. Makes you wonder if they're prepared to violate this law. What other laws will these Liberals break? We've seen some broken, as I said before, by the Prime Minister, by the Public Safety Minister, by the Small Business Minister. And these Liberals, when they got tired of being found guilty for breaking Canada's Conflict of Interest Act, the laws that are supposed to protect, exactly the kind of thing that led to $400 million in corruption in this latest expense scandal. They got tired of getting caught, so they appointed the Public Safety Minister, who he had been found guilty, of course, of breaking the Conflict of Interest Act and clam scam, awarding lucrative contracts to his family members. Again, Liberal insiders, always their priority. They appointed his sister-in-law to be the ethics commissioner. Well, how convenient would that be? Thanksgiving dinner this weekend. Hey, nice to see you. Could you pass the stuffing? Also, could you look the other way on this latest conflict of interest affecting the Liberals? That's what they're cooking up this Thanksgiving weekend. But the production of these documents was ordered by the House. They, of course, wanted to go to committee to bury it. Now, the amendment and sub-amendment put forward are extremely reasonable. The list of witnesses that we would want to testify to provide fulsome answers to committee is incredibly important. But we would be faced with another problem when we get there. And we will get to a point where the House can vote for this to go to committee. Once we've had the opportunity to have this debate, but then we're going to deal with another issue affecting their government, further paralyzing Parliament. And that deals with the employment minister, this Liberal Prime Minister's minister from Edmonton, who, along with his pandemic profiteering business partner, have this unbelievable scandal that has seen a ruling from you, Speaker, about the rights of democratically elected members to get fulsome, honest answers and information from individuals that are sent for by this place. Again, a right of this House to send for people, to send for papers. And in that case, the individual, the business partner of the Liberal minister from Edmonton Centre, refused to provide information on who, quote, other Randy is. Now, we need to know that information because it strikes at the heart of a matter that's incredibly important to Canadians. We learned that the Liberal minister from Edmonton Centre, his business, while he's serving in cabinet, of which he owned a 50% share, was awarded a contract by his own government. Well, that's not okay. But what makes it worse is that the minister said he hadn't been in contact with his business partner for all of 2022 in particular. Why is 2022 important? Because his business partner said the minister hadn't been in touch with him either for that year. Okay, well, we'll take the minister at his word, case closed, right? Unfortunately, you can trust them as far as you can throw them. We demanded the production of papers, again, one of those rights that we have. And what did we learn? They were texting and they were talking. Why is that a problem? One, because what he said wasn't the truth. What the witness said, his business partner, Mr. Anderson, wasn't the truth. What they told the newspaper wasn't the truth. But it also means that a sitting member of the Liberal cabinet was directing the day-to-day business affairs of his company that was netting Government of Canada contracts worth tens of thousands of dollars. To say nothing of the fact that the service they provided was, as I said, pandemic profiteering. These were like the guys during the pandemic who would go to Costco, buy up all the toilet paper, and then sell it out of their van at the end of the parking lot for an inflated price. But instead of just the people in their community who were the victims, they victimized people across Canada getting contracts from all kinds of governments with the name of a sitting cabinet minister as the co-owner of this business. So that's what they've been doing. That's the matter that this House is, the matters this House is seized with, paralyzed by, and it all has to do with conflicts of interest and refusing to follow the law, orders of Parliament. So if Canadians have to follow the law, why don't these Liberals? Why don't these Liberals? And I do get asked often by Canadians. They want to know why it is the RCMP won't finally investigate. And here we have a letter from the Commissioner of the RCMP dated October the 9th. And it reads in part that I wish to inform you that the Royal Canadian Mounted Police investigation into SDTC is ongoing. Now, SDTC, Sustainable Development Technologies Canada, which operated under governments of different stripes up until 2017 with a clean bill of health from Canada's Auditor General. So Stephen Harper absolutely oversaw this fund. You know, you hear the Liberals say Conservatives don't want to take any action on environment. Here we are with this clean tech business with $1 billion of Canadian tax money, looking to help startups and innovators in the clean tech space. We think it's incredibly important that we solve issues facing our environment, facing our climate with technology, not a tax on everything that we know that in my province of Ontario is going to cost families $1,400 more than they get back in the fake phony rebates that these Liberals talk up. So we have this fund, SDTC, Clean Bill of Health by the Auditor General up to 2017. But it's after that when the trouble sets in. This Liberal Prime Minister appoints his choice, a Liberal chair of the fund. Well, guess what happened? The Liberal Prime Minister found guilty of breaking ethics laws twice. What do you think happened when he put his hand-picked selection in his chair? Well, here come the conflicts of interest, 186 of them. And $400 million that we know about. This is really important because the Auditor General didn't look into 100% of the deals done and the votes cast at the $1 billion slush fund. But of the cases they looked into, the Auditor General and her army of auditors found that there were conflicts in 80% of them. 80%. There's no other organization in the world that when they find out that one of their subsidiaries is rife with corruption and alleged criminality, that they say, well, we're not going to turn over the documents to the RCMP. We're not going to call the cops. We're going to call a committee. There's no other organization that would do that unless they've got something to hide. What do they have to hide? Well, I think we know. It's all the things they don't want the Royal Canadian Mounted Police to see. They're worried that the King's Cowboys are going to ride in and find all kinds of dirty deals with Liberal insiders getting rich while Canadians were lined up at food banks in record numbers. It's StatsCan. StatsCan this week said that income inequality in this country has reached a point never seen before since they started measuring it in the history of our country. It's StatsCan who said that 1 in 4 Canadians don't know where their next meals are going to come from. And I think that that's really important because the unemployment rate in this country isn't 25% or 1 in 4. So that means that you have millions of Canadians who are going to work, and in between the shift at their first job and the start of their shift at their second job, they've got to make a stop at the food bank so they can afford to feed themselves and their children. That's life after 9 years of this NDP Liberal Prime Minister. And it's not that they've been spending money to help Canadians get ahead. They've been spending money to make sure that Liberal insiders live large. We saw it with their $60 million Arrive scam. We see it in this case of the $400 million at their Green Slush Fund, Sustainable Development Technologies Canada, which of course, when confronted with the problem, they denied it, and then they folded it only to pull it underneath the industry minister who isn't turning over documents to the police. We saw it when the Prime Minister tried to reward his buddies at the WE organization, Mark and Craig Kielburger. We saw it when he tried to help his friends at SNC Lavalin with a get out of jail free card, and when he got called out by his own Attorney General. How did he treat Miss Wilson-Raybould, an experienced Crown prosecutor? How did he treat her? He fired her, he threw her under the bus. And when the health minister, an experienced physician, stood up and said what was happening was wrong, what did he do to that second woman in his caucus who spoke out against him? He threw her under the bus too. Because it's all about Liberal insiders. And when he gets a phone call from someone who's getting millions of dollars from his government and says, hey, I've got a big grant that I'm looking for a couple $1 million. Let's talk about it at my island in the Bahamas. Bring the president of the Liberal Party with you. Why don't you do that too? We can have a nice conversation about that together. Free trip for himself. But who's picking up the tab? It's always Canadians who are stuck with the bill when it comes to this Prime Minister who's helping Liberal insiders and his well-connected friends to get ahead. So the ask is very simple. 1, don't break the law, okay? Looks like they struggled with that one. So the second ask is, now Parliament, which has the legal authority to order the production of these documents, that is a matter of fact. It's not, the parliamentary secretary can stand up and wave his arms and shout about it, but it's the law, it's a fact. He can not like it. And he says he doesn't like the law. We know that about these Liberals. They break the law, they don't like the law, but you know what? We weren't elected to make him happy. We were elected to protect the interests of Canadians who are just struggling to get by. And I've got really good news at the end of what seems like a pretty depressing 20 minutes after a depressing 9 years, is that common sense Conservatives have a promise that we've made to Canadians. And that's that life wasn't like this before that Liberal Prime Minister, and it's not going to be like that after him. We will restore the Canadian promise of bigger paychecks, homes that people can afford in safe neighborhoods, and a comfortable retirement. That's the Canadian dream. That's the Canadian promise. It's why all of us ran for office. It's why we can't wait for there to be a carbon tax election, because Canadians deserve a choice between 9 years of taxes going up, costs going up, crime is going up, crime having gone up, because now time is up. Canadians are ready for a change, and we're ready to bring it home. Thank you.
A scandal like this should be the lead item on the news day after day. There should be banner headlines on front pages every time there's a new development. There should be shadowy figures in parking garages smoking cigarettes, handing out documents to hardworking investigative reporters.
I can't tell you who I am, but I worked on the campaign.
Hey, Mr. Smithers!
But none of that is really happening. Instead, the Parliamentary Press Gallery is focusing on all different kinds of issues where they can try to distract Canadians from the real essence of the scandal.
It's the headline everywhere. Prince Charles, before he was king, shrieking at seeing shrink wrap, or plastic wrap as we call it, for the first time.
So instead of letting the mainstream media confuse and distract, let's get right into the essence of this scandal.
The findings that were the findings used to suspend SDTC were known to the federal government all the way back in May of 2023.
There's a fund called Sustainable Development Technology Canada, and it's supposed to give grants to companies who have legitimate, innovative ideas to improve Canada's environmental record. Now, SDTC is a huge organization funded by the government to the tune of $1 billion in tax money. The Liberals appointed their friends to the board. That board gets to decide who gets the cash. And what did they do when those Liberal insiders sat around the table? They started handing out money to their own companies. $400 million of your money went not to improve environmental outcomes, but to line the pockets of Liberal insiders. $334 million over 186 cases to projects in which board members held a conflict of interest. That means they benefited from the decision, and they were the ones who made the decision. $58 million to 10 projects that weren't even eligible and couldn't even demonstrate any environmental benefit at all or any development of green technology. The Ethics Commissioner found that the chair of this board, this Liberal appointee, broke the law when she funneled money into her own company. After 9 years, the Trudeau Liberals aren't even trying to be creative in their corruption. There was a giant pile of money, which is why we call it a slush fund. And the Liberals on the board that got to make the decision as to who got the money gave it to themselves. This is so blatant, it got caught the first time the fund was audited. If this storyline were part of a movie or a television series, it probably would get rejected due to lazy and bad writing. How do we know this? It's because a brave whistleblower testified at committee and blew the lid wide open on this gross corruption scandal. Here's what the whistleblower said. It should never have taken 2 years for the issues to reach this point, and what should have been a straightforward process turned into a bureaucratic nightmare that allowed SDTC to continue wasting millions of dollars and abusing countless employees over the last year. Now, if you were in government, you might think, well, hey, let's hold the lawbreakers to account. Let's let the truth come out, and let's let the RCMP charge those who knowingly stuffed their own pockets with your cash. But instead, what are the Liberals doing? They're fighting this tooth and nail. They're actually paralyzing Parliament to keep these documents hidden. Here's what that same whistleblower said about criminal activity.
I think the Auditor General's investigation was more of a cursory review. I don't think the goal and mandate of the Auditor General's office to actually look into criminality, so I'm not surprised by the fact that they haven't found anything criminal, because they're not looking at intent. So if their investigation was focused on intent, of course they would find the criminality.
And do you believe that the RCMP doesn't have authority to investigate in this matter?
No, I definitely believe they have authority.
That's why we need the RCMP to have all the documents so they can see who knew what and when, who was directing people to make those decisions and who got rich off of your tax money. So the Conservatives passed a parliamentary order to produce all the documents, have the government send all the evidence to the RCMP, and the Liberals refused. So the Speaker ruled that Parliament can't debate anything else until it deals with this corruption scandal. If they're willing to pay the political price for seizing up Parliament, grinding it to a halt, the only conclusion possible is that there must be something so bad in these documents, evidence so damning, that they are willing to pay the political price for grinding Parliament to a halt and cancelling part of the parliamentary session. But Conservatives aren't going to let them run away from the scandal. We're going to continue to fight on behalf of you, the taxpayers. We want the lawbreakers held to account, and we want to get your money back. Once again, thanks for watching.